Welcome to the 35th video in the Just In Case mini-series sponsored by Quality and Equality consultancy firm based in Oxford, United Kingdom. And my name is Mei An Chung Judge, and I'm the founder of the firm. We call it Just In Case. It's just in case that you need to be reminded about something and refresh something or learn something new. Today, we again are joined by Barry Oshry, a distinguished educator and pioneer in the field of human systems thinking. Barry is the author of many books like Seeing the System, Leading the System, and In the Middle. And he and his wife, Karen, has pioneered and started an organization that is called Power Plus System Training. And it continues to operate to train many of us in understanding these deep insights. So in the video number 20, Barry joined us by sharing how we can learn to see system and explore the dynamics that we fall into in organization, and how we can look beneath the veil to see the patterns, which is so important. And today, Barry continued that theme, but shared with us a deeper understanding of the human system by focusing on system as a whole, and then also look more detail into the tops, the middle, the bottom of these systems, and how they exist, interact, and how they can be transformed in their relationship to bring life. Barry shares such amazing details and dynamics that he has through many, many years of experience and reflection. And may I say thank you to you, Barry, for willing to give your time for those OD practitioners around the world who wants to know your work better. So over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Mei-Ann. Thanks again for the opportunity to share more of my work with the people. And, as usual, the notion is the goal is to deepen our understanding of the human systems of which we are a part. And finally, for whatever leverage that gives us in being able to create more satisfying, more productive, more creative relationships in all of these systems. And today the focus is going to be in the previous session that I did, the focus was on looking at the systemic relationships that we fall into in system life. Today I'm going to focus on systems as wholes. And we are probably the most social of all social creatures. We live in the widest variety of social systems, from the family, the community, the organization, the work group, the faith group, the nation, the political association, the voluntary associations, on and on and on it goes. So we are members of all of these human systems. And so I want to talk first about a beginning definition of what we mean by a human system, and then take a look at what those systems do and our roles in them, and how can we improve the quality of our existence in those systems. So we're talking about a human system is any collection of people, anywhere from two, that could be a system, up to many millions, that could be a system. That's what makes it a system, is that we are connected to one another, either on the basis of some task, some function, some purpose, some ideology, some identity, some belief system. So obviously, there's a wide range of the kinds of systems, that a wide range of the power of the connections that exist among us. Some are pretty remote connections, some are very, very proximal connections. The other element of a human system is that the whole has attributes that are different from the parts. It is and does things differently from what we members are and do. And that's going to get clear. We're going to look at what those components of the whole are. And the other element of that is that the characteristics of the whole, what it is and what it does, tend to be invisible to us members. We do not see that. So the consequences of our invisibility, of the attributes of the whole, those consequences can be great, as we will see, in terms of producing unnecessary personal stress, disappointment in our relationships, broken relationships, lost opportunities, real possibilities that could have happened, and basically system dysfunction and sometimes actually the dissolution of systems. So my work throughout my professional life and today with you is to see if we can make the invisible visible, and out of that process find ways to create more satisfying, more productive, more creative human systems. So that's the goal of the day. What are the attributes? Remember when I said whole systems have attributes other than the members? Well, if we're looking at the whole system, what are the attributes of the whole system? What do these whole systems that we're a part of, what do they do? So we've come up with 4 fundamental processes that these whole systems engage in various combinations and in various intensities, but here's what they are. So what whole systems individuate, and that means that the parts, the members, the subgroups move separately from one another, independently from one another. We're out there sort of pursuing our individual agendas. This is a freedom, independence. So that's one attribute. And whole systems integrate. That is, we come together, sharing with one another, working together for some common outcome. So when we're individuating, we're working on our individual agendas. When we integrate, we're working on our collective agenda. And whole systems differentiate. That is, they may start off in a simple form, but in time they elaborate a variety of forms and functions for interacting with the environment. Just think of those of you who work in healthcare systems, how differentiated a system that is in terms of the specialties and the specialties within specialties. And that's the medical side, and then there's the nursing side, and the administrative side, and the basic service side. So that's what whole systems do. And whole systems homogenize. The ultimate homogenization system, say, would be one in which anybody can do what anybody else in that system can do. We are totally homogenized. So you see, differentiating is the system elaborates difference. Homogenized, the system elaborates its commonality. Individuation, the system members are separate, and in integration, members are connected. Now, one other factor. Early on, I had some conversations with Adam Kahan as he was talking about the role of love and power as success factors in his large-scale interventions. And that got me to thinking about, thinking about whole systems and the attributes of whole systems. How does a whole system express its love? How does it express its power? And it seemed very crystal clear to me that a system expresses its love through integration and homogenization. When members are working together around a common goal, and when we're working on our commonality with one another, differences are submerged, commonality reigns. And the system expresses its power through individuation, setting individuals free to pursue independence, and through differentiation, as the system is allowed to become more and more of its possibilities. Okay, so this is that. Still looking at the attributes of the whole. Now here's one that could be a little controversial, but I say a system is just a potential. It can be any of these things. It can individuate, integrate, homogenize, differentiate. It can do them intensely, mildly, all of that. So it's a potential. And it is a potential for being a robust system, a system of both power and love. And where members are using themselves fully, where relationships are positive, productive, satisfying, where the system as a whole is doing its work well, that's all the possibility. But now we look at another aspect. So far, we've been talking about what systems do. Now we want to talk about where systems are. What's the environment in which a system enters? And basically, if we look at top, middle, and bottom systems, we see that they are living in very different environments. Tops are living in an environment of accountability. Whoever's in that space is accountable for the whole system, whether it's the family, the organization, the work group, the meeting, whatever. And it's to varying degrees, it's a complex environment, a lot of difficult issues to deal with. And it's an unpredictable environment. It's not like there's a complex job and you just have to work it out. It's that things come up, unexpected things, and that you're still accountable. How do you deal with those? So that's what's happening. And then, so that's the world, that the system can enter that world of accountability and complexity and uncertainty. And if you look at the middle system, the environment of the middle system is a tearing world. It's one that pulls middles apart from one another, out toward other groups or individuals that they're supposed to manage, service, lead, coach, whatever. And the bottom system is a system of vulnerability, where you're in that place where there are other people who can influence your lives in major and minor ways. So now, given that, we've got a sense of what systems do. We have a sense of environments that systems are going to be in. Now let me lay out 3 different stories about systems entering environments, what life looks like on the surface and what's going on beneath the surface. So first we're going to look at top systems. Now, what do you mean by, what are some examples of top systems? Obviously, the senior leaders of the organization, the executive, the C group. Another top system would be friends from college or from the neighborhood have always really loved one another, got along well, played a lot of ball together, went drinking together, always had a great time. We've decided we're going to go into business together. Or another one is partners have decided to create a family. Again, we love one another, and we want to go through life together, and we want to create a family. That's the whole system. Or it could be a project team who is now, setting out, we're going to run this really important project, and we're there. Now, one of the things about a top system is usually the people who are in top systems have either chosen to be there because they really like one another, get along with one another, think they're going to be great, or they're put together, say, in the executive place because they think, hey, this is a great combination of background, experience, expertise. It'll just be terrific to make this thing really fly. Now, that's going to be especially important as we look to what happens to the system over time. Above the surface, on the surface, what we see are people going into this world. They do what they do. One thing happens after another, and off we go. Looking beneath the surface, here's a story that unfolds. And keep in mind that the story I'm about to describe is invisible to us. What happens when we take a top system and put them into this environment of complexity, accountability, and uncertainty? So what happens? Systems, whole entities, they adapt to the environment that you put them in. They adapt. So the top system differentiates. That's what it does. In that environment, you survive by differentiating. In order to deal with all of the complexity that's there, you need to. You do this, you do that. I'll wash, you'll wipe. I'll take care of relationships with China. You handle the neighborhood issues. We'll handle finance. We'll handle long-distance planning. All of this it's the only way, because the world is constantly changing. So differentiation is far from being a problem. It's a requirement. It's a necessity in the top system to really be able to master differentiation. So that's not a problem. It's what happens next. What happens next is we harden into our differentiations. That is, what I mean by that is each of us burrows down into our area. And we become more knowledgeable about our area, less knowledgeable about the others. We become more responsible for our area, less responsible for the others. So in time, what started off as differentiations now become territories. Now here's another facet about system life. The patterns that we fall into shape our consciousness. Now take a look at what's happened in that top system. The top system has fallen into this pattern of power without love. That is, it's a highly differentiated system now, and the parts are separate from others. There's not a lot of integration across parts. They're separate from others. So uh, the consciousness that we fall into that top world, is one in which we develop what we call a mine mentality. This is my area, and keep away from it. And I don't particularly enjoy your sticking your nose into that. And I'm protective of my area, and I try to burnish it, make it look as good as possible. I tend not to share my problems. I tend to, hide those. And so now there's a whole range of personal issues. Now remember, we're people who came into this. We love one another, respect one another. Now take a look at what's starting to happen as a consequence of this pattern we've fallen into. But we don't know that. But we do. So there are issues that arise about relative importance. Who's handling the more important piece of the business and who's handling the less important pieces? There are issues around respect. I just don't get respect for the contributions that I'm making to this system, whether I'm the significant one or the less significant one. There are issues around trust. I really need to trust that you're doing your job well. I'm not sure you do. There are issues around support. Certainly I'm getting support from one another. And here's where the relationship is most vulnerable to falling apart. And that is because of the uncertainty in that top world. There are certain issues crop up that do not have clear-cut, right, wrong answers. So, for example, how cautious or expansive should we be? Should we be saving our money now and build what we need now and then maybe spend more later on? On the other hand, listen, maybe we need to spend now to really get this thing moving and developing, and then we'll worry about the rest later on. Now you can see how that kind of issue can easily polarize. The more I push for caution, taking it easy, the more it makes the expansive person more nervous about you're going to slow us down. And the more the expansive person pushes expansion, the more that frightens the caution one. So that's just one kind of divisiveness. There's a whole question too, similar to it, which is, do we stick to our knitting, keep doing what we do well, or do we branch out into new areas? And again, we can split around that and polarize that about how do we handle the children, the family, or the employees? What kind of relationships do we establish with them? Are we firm with them, or are we laissez-faire, democratic, autocratic? Again, we can polarize it. Issues happen around that. And that polarization around that is one of the places that causes the systems to dissolve, ends up in divorce, separation, or one partner is his long delayed wish to spend more time fly fishing in the Maine woods, as off he goes, disappointment, and also just a lot of it happened. What's the explanation for all that? It's also personal issues that we never saw before, but they suddenly came out. My mother warned me about you, but I just didn't see it. So the explanations are personal. And so, of course, when the explanations are personal, that's what the solutions are. Divorce, separate, dissolve, etc. And what I haven't mentioned is not only is this happening to us, but there are also some system consequences to this. As we develop our territories through the system, we've created these costly and redundant silos. And so you have parts of the organization, each pursuing its separateness. No easy communication across. Costly confusion below, questions about divided loyalties below, things of that sort. So that's the story that started so beautifully and ends not so well. So say, we wanted to create a really empowered top system. What would we do? Well, we look at this pattern, we say, what is missing here? Well, it's clear. What's missing is integration and homogenization. There's no working together across these territories. There is growing differentiation. Getting more different from one another. No homogeneity, no mutual understanding. So let me put out one possibility. Obviously, what you want to work at is how do we do more integrating with one another, etc. Here's a work possibility for any top system, and that is if they were to understand this process, to build into their situation something what might be called mutual coaching. It would go something like this. Those of you who are coaches or consultants would probably develop a more elegant procedure, but say it goes something like this, that they make the commitment to meet periodically. Maybe it's every week or every 2 weeks, something like that. It's an offsite. And what they're going to do during this period of time is to take turns sharing with one another. This is what's happening in my arena. This is the part that's going well. This is what's troubling to me, and I could use some new thinking about that. At that point, the other members become coaches. And sometimes coaching is nothing more than giving the person the opportunity to talk out the situation and getting some more clarity just that way, being able to speak to some peers about that. Or sometimes coaching takes the form of probing questions. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And sometimes coaching takes the form of some sharing of experiences. Something like that happens to me too. And this is what I've been working on. So these are all the possibilities of what coaching is. Now just notice, and then we go around and the same thing happens with the other. Now what's happening here? Notice what it's doing to that system as a whole. That system as a whole is now becoming more differentiated. Differentiations are being strengthened by the inputs that's coming from one another. In addition to that, the system clearly is becoming more, there's more commonality, it's becoming more homogenized. We are now much more knowledgeable about one another's arenas and are able to be more helpful around that. The system still remains individuated, even though we're that. Each of us is still responsible for our arena. That has not gone away. We're just more fully armed with knowledge and information and thoughts, ideas, possibilities around that. The system is much more integrated than it was. And notice this interesting thing about responsibility, that when we're into territory, we're responsible for our areas and not for others. You would know, when you coach somebody, you have an investment in that person. You want them to succeed. And around them transforming to a top system, that kind of process, obviously, you now not just share responsibility, you feel responsible for success. You want that person to succeed, which is very different from how we feel when we're in this territoriality. Okay, so now that's telling you that is a dynamite plan for creating a robust top system. And then top say, well, maybe, but it won't work with these guys. Oh, and so you're kind of missing the point. But anyhow, so what's the possibility? Even if a system even if a relationship is ended, divorce may be one of the possibilities. One of the values of this is to take a look at how it develops systemically as a way of reviewing and moving out of the system. Maybe it takes some of the bad feeling out by just renewing. And maybe in a more optimistic way, it can be used as to restart the relationship. Let's begin again. And let's work from this mutual coaching framework and give that a chance to see where he goes. And of course, the absolute best is, if ever this kind of systemic thinking gets into the culture, and it's not just you and me, people know this is what happens. We are human systems. Our systems enter environments, and these are processes that unfold. And it's possible for us to control the outcomes, to make a difference in what this is. And so, you're going into marriage, learn about this. You're going into a business relationship, learn about this. You're going, whatever. Okay, so that's top. Now, next we're going to do is look at bottom systems. Now, again, bottom systems, people are not thinking of themselves first off as systems. On the surface, we are just the following. Workers in an organization, that's one. People in a low-income neighborhood, that's another. A group that is regularly discriminated in society, that's another. And I even throw in one which just seems really bizarre, but our nation would be another. Doesn't feel like a bottom system, but we'll see. So that's the system. On the surface, we just go about our business interacting with one another. It's just one effing thing after another, etc. Even though it doesn't feel like it, we are also beneath the surface. We are this organic system with potential to be anything, including to be a robust system with outstanding ability to survive and develop a great experience for our members, etc. But here's what happens. When the system now enters the bottom environment, the bottom space, which is a space of vulnerability, where there is a them who can do stuff to us, who can influence our lives in major or minor ways, who can harm us, and who even have the power to dissolve us. We enter that. So, for example, the workers in the organization, now the word is out. We hear that there's going to be a cutback on jobs, that some jobs are being shipped overseas. Who knows? Maybe the whole operation is going to be shipped overseas. There we are. The people in the low-income area have been noted people coming in well-dressed in suits and clipboards and taking notes and looking over buildings. And it looks like the gentrification project is underway. And we're in danger of losing our neighborhood and losing our homes. The discriminated group been going on, low, what calls kind of a low fever condition, but now suddenly new attacks on us are mounting in the society. And then the nation, we felt pretty comfortable and free, and then suddenly there has been an attack on our shores, and now we feel vulnerable to this enemy who is threatening us. So on the surface, there we go about our business, but here's what's happening underneath. So you put a system, you put a bottom system into an environment of vulnerability. And systems, as I say, systems adapt to the conditions. So what it does is the system automatically, reflexively coalesces. People are drawn together. The system becomes integrated and homogenized. Even the language, much more talking about we, less I, less differences are less important than what we have in common. We're connecting with one another around that. And that, again, is very adaptive, because even in the face of vulnerability, we feel less vulnerable. We feel stronger, like we can better able to handle this, rightly or wrongly. We may not be, but the sense, the coalescence makes us feel that way. And eventually then we harden in that coalescence. So the boundaries that both keep us in and separate us from them, those boundaries harden. So once again, the structure that we fall into shapes our consciousness. Now we fall into a we-them relationship. We fall into the we internally, love without power. We fall into a them relationship with them, which is power without love. So internally, the we is, we're connected and homogenized. Unity and connectedness. With them, it's differentiation. We're different from them and separate from them. That is unintegrated with them. Yeah, we're in the same, but we don't interact, connect with one another in mutually supportive ways. Okay, so now let's look what happened. Now, what are the relationships within the we? Now, what are the vulnerabilities in there? Now, on the one hand, within the we is friendliness, we feel close, connected, etc. But also, there are a lot of pressures towards conformity, towards agreement. Not allow, individuality is suppressed. You just don't go out and do your own thing. You check with the group, and if it fits, okay, and if it doesn't fit, you sit on it and don't do it. You don't explore, there's a way we're going to handle this, and you don't come up with your own way. You may think about it, you may try it out, but if you don't like it, boom, it comes back in. So there's a suppression of individuation. And if you go too far, and you're no longer in the we. Now you become a scab in the labor, or you become a traitor to the country. And once that is, you're no longer we. Now you are them, and you're subject to the same treatment that you would do them. And there's another tension within there that arises, and inevitably arises between those who believe in a soft orientation to dealing with them and those who believe in a tougher orientation. And that varies all along the scale. Let me just, a small aside to tell you about the universality of that. I was given a talk like this a while back, and it was a very small exercise that we did, a small version of a top, middle, bottom exercise. And as I'm talking about that in that bottom group, you get this split between the softs and the hards. And the guy jumps up and he says, "No, that wasn't true. We were all together on this." I said, "Okay." And then somebody else pops up and says, "No, it's not true. I disagreed, but I didn't want to talk about it." And so, that was a lively demonstration of the fact that the tendency is not to disagree with the we. The tendency is to sit on it and suffer from that. The relationships with them are, if it's amity within, well, it's enmity without, where it's basically you're dehumanizing them, seeing them as different from you and as lesser than you. And so you can do to them things that you wouldn't do with one another. You give them dehumanizing names, you poke fun at them behind their backs, don't give your full effort into the work. You may even find ways of sabotaging things and all of that. And so, so these relationships, notice what's happening here. And again, when the relationships are breaking down between people and across, it all again feels very real, very specific to who they are, even internally, the troubles you're having with one another. It's these over-controlling guys here. And, according to them, it's, we have good reason to because of how they are. They're mean, they're arrogant, they're selfish, they're greedy, whatever it is. Okay, so now the challenge again is there a way in that bottom system to create a robust human system? See, the challenge is it makes sense for the bottom system to adapt, to coalesce. That does give that sense of strength. But the issue is it possible to coalesce, even better than that coalescing, without falling into these we-them distortions? So that's the challenge. So the question is, how do you transform the relationship inside the bottom group? How do we infuse power into love? How do we create some freedom? We say, okay, we're in agreement about what is our overall goal here? It's survival. And other ways to improve our survivability. If you look at the geopolitical world, communism, whether it was in Russia or in China, were gradually crushing themselves by this pressure towards uniformity and the suppression of individuality. Individuality was the capitalist road. It was a terrible thing. Don't do it. But that they finally found that you had to, in order to save the system, was to allow for some form of freedom and capitalism to evolve. And also in the bottom, transforming the bottom system, it's allowing for multiple strategies. Let me give you a lab story, which is not an unusual one, where the bottom, the immigrants at a particular point in time, would regularly get into this internal struggle between tough and soft. How are we going to deal with them? What do we deal with our condition? And sometimes those can be endless conversations. And in one group, the tension is between the constitutionalists and the radicals. And the radicals are bursting to just get up to the house, take over the house, bring the society down, and go from there. And the constitutionalist says going for there is nothing. We have to start off with what's our image of the kind of society we want to create, what's wrong with this, and build that. So now the radicals say, you're just slowing us down. You're just too weak. And they're saying, you're going to destroy it for all of us. You're just too dangerous. On and on it goes. One day, a colleague of mine, Fritz Steele, came across that group, and he noticed the tension going on and on. And he made a simple intervention, something like this. He said, seems to me there are two teams here. Something happened. It like struck him that maybe these two directions are not contradictory. Maybe the two can be pursued simultaneously. So all of a sudden energy is released, which is what happens when you put some individuation into the bottom system. And the constitutionalists are busy at work putting together their framework for the new society. The radicals are making their plans for how we take over the house. Later on, it happens. The action takes place. The constitutionalists join in with that action because they don't want to give the image of that the system is divided. There is also part of that, which also makes another point, which is even when that system differentiates, it doesn't mean you go there and I go here. I can be both. And it's sometimes we've even seen that at points in time where a person suddenly has been a radical within the society, and then something happens, and now they're a negotiator within the society. So the multiple processes, any one person can be all things, which is what homogenization is. So anyhow, and then what is even more, I think, and I'll just give it to you and have you think about it, and you can disagree with me or agree with me or just mull about it for a while, is how do you transform your relationship with them? Right now, it's a relationship of seeing them as different from you and basically worse, and you're better than them and separate from you. And so it's a relationship of power without love. How do you now insert love into that relationship? Connection and commonality. Why would you? Well, let's see. And so what would it mean by engaging in conversations with them, being able to share your experiences, both in the system and outside of the system? What are the areas of commonality between you? And just that kind of connection and commonality, what is the point of that? The point of that is that what you want to do is to make it difficult for them to want to harm you. That is, the more we see, the more we experience commonality with others, the more difficult it is. Think back to slavery. And one of the most dangerous things a slave could do would be to indicate that he or she can read and that he or she can write, because that would be an indication of commonality between the slave and the master. And you can get severely punished for that because there is no commonality. There's not to be any commonality between the two. And then one might say that the normal motto in the bottom world is, in unity there is strength. But is that true? Or is it more true that in unity, through freedom and diversity, there is strength? That is, can we be a unified body in which still there is individual freedom within that unity and diversity within that unity? Does that, in fact, increase our possibility for survival? Okay, and now for our last story, let's look at middle systems. And so what are some examples of middle systems? Peer supervisors in the organization, peer middle managers at a higher level, peer staff specialists, each with their own specialty, or out there coaching, servicing, whatever. I love this one. Bedroom communities are middles. We'll take a look at that. And the free enterprise system, as opposed to a communal society, is also a middle system. And that is, what's common here is that these are people who are pulled away from one another out toward individuals or groups or work or professions or whatever it is. And now basically, these are people who would say, this is no system. I mean, what do you mean by system? It's a total separation. And so I'm going to maintain this is system. And it's a system in a particular state, just like water, ice, steam. These are all same thing in different states. These are all middle systems which are in a state of dispersal. So what's life like? So here we are. There are these individuals, I say, underneath the surface. They're just going through life, one thing after another. Beneath the surface, they are a system with the potential to be a powerful system. That may seem absolutely off the wall with regard to most system groups. There's no power here. But so what happens? What is the story? On the surface, go. Underneath, the system enters this tearing world. Systems adapt to the environments that they're in. Top system differentiates, bottom system coalesces, middle system disperses. Out we go. And it's functional. That's what has to happen. In order for you to survive, in order for the system to survive, you have to be out there leading, coaching, managing, supervising, professionalizing, whatever it is doing. That's not the problem. What happens next is the problem. And that is we harden in our separateness. We harden in our individuation. So the middle system then has fallen into this pattern of neither power nor love. And with that, the patterns we fall into shape our consciousness. And in the middle world, that consciousness is an I mentality. It's the mentality that goes along with our separateness. And the I mentality is one in which we feel unique. We feel like we have little in common with the others. We tend to be competitive with the others on really surface issues. Or, organizationally, it's how they talk and how they think and how they dress and the color of their skin. Ultimately, issues because we have no real contact with one another. We tend to be evaluative on very surface dimensions. And ultimately, there is the experience that there is no collective power among us. There's no power here. In this bedroom community, power is above us, power is below us. And so what happens? Basically, the effects of us individually is we're out there, we're alone in the organization, we feel the pressures of the system alone, we are unsupported, we don't belong to anybody, we're not part of the tops, we're not part of the bottoms, and we're not connected with one another. We're taking all the pressures of the system, we have a limited perspective. All we know is what's going on in our particular unit. We have no notion of what's going on elsewhere. That makes us easily blindsided. Oh, what happened over here? Suddenly that middle has put in a Coke machine. And now our group would say, what's the matter with us? Why don't we have a Coke machine? How come we have such a weak middle? Or they've got over there, they set up for Christmas parties. We don't have a Christmas party, and they're paying for their Christmas party. And so now you got all that other additional tension in here. There are complaints from all sides. It's not unusual, that middle place, to really feel the complaints. You're not quite doing enough for anybody. You begin to feel maybe there's something wrong with you. Maybe you are weak or not as competent as you need to be. And the leadership, because of the perspective and the limited view that you have on a potential blindsiding, tends to be producing weak leadership. Tops have got a lot of issues with you. And I've heard this so many times. Tops had complaints about middle. They can't get consistent information out from middles. This one's got one story, this one's got that. They can't get initiatives down consistently through the middle. They don't get on the entrepreneurship in the middle. It's all asking me. And there's a lack of coordination among them. You know, one goes here, one goes there. You know what happened with the Coke machines or the exercise bikes, whatever. So, okay, so there it is. And now again, explanations for this. It's clearly it's personal. It's what I see. And when a top looks down at weak middles, he says, "It's too bad. I thought they were really better than that, but poor me." And middles look at one another and what they see. That's reality. So now the question is, how do we create an empowered middle system? And so the question is, again, middles need to be excellent in dispersion. Dispersion is not the problem. That's what the job is. The system needs to disperse, and it needs to do it well. So if you look at that system, you say, what's missing? Clearly, by now, you got the answer. Right. Integration. Integration is the basic. Not what happens if these middles, instead of just living in that dispersed state, what if they were integrating with one another? Integrating is an active process. It means periodically they're getting together And you say, I want you to start thinking also in terms of intelligence operatives who are out there gathering information. You're doing your job, but you're also picking up information, what's going on in the system. And then we come together and we share that information with one another. We share best practice. We raise problems, issues. We can coach one another, support one another. We can coordinate. I've got this push around Coke machines. What do you think about that? Is that going to cause any problems? Does it work over here? Are you interested in that? Or can we at least communicate this difference in a way that's not going to blow the whole system up? We can diagnose system-wide issues. So notice that how that simple business of regularly regularly integrating with one another totally transforms the system life. Middles no longer feel alone, unsupported. They're part of a team, and it's a team that informs them and supports them and strengthens them through coaching. It's a team that from the top perspective, it now is able to handle issues together that normally float up to the top in the top's world of complexity. They now become better able to lead and service. They provide more consistent and informed leadership and service to other folks. And the system as a whole is just a more coordinated system. Now, if you just go talk to middles about it, again, it's the question of, well, yeah, that might be good, but not with these people. Well, why wouldn't it be these people? Well, because it would work, but with us, we're unique. We have a little in common. We're competitive. We're valued. We don't get along with one another. And so that kind of cycle is going. And so on the surface, how we feel about one another in a situation feels specific. It's about these people. But you see, beneath the surface where we understand system, we see that what's happened in that middle world is a recurring pattern. It's happening to middles at all levels in thousands and thousands of places across the world. On the surface, what we're feeling about one another feels to us like a reflection of reality. That's how it is. It can't be any other way. When we understand the system life, we realize that's not the case. How we feel about one another, our experience, is a consequence of the pattern we have fallen in. It's a consequence of falling into the mind mentality, the I mentality, the we-them mentality. And if we want to change, the image is, on the surface, the way you create change is you change the people. Get a better class of tops. You get a better class of middles, a better class of bottoms. When you understand it from a systems perspective, you say, no, change comes by changing the pattern, by infusing love into power or power into love. The main message for us as human beings is to get that notion that the patterns we fall into shape our consciousness. Once we get that, the world that we're experiencing is not necessarily the world that it has to be, that it's a function of what we have fallen into. If we change the pattern, we'll experience ourselves and others very differently. And ultimately, the issue is this. It's not that seeing patterns is an interesting option. It's the only way we see. When we don't see patterns, all we see is one thing after another. One interaction, and then this, and then this, and then this. When we see patterns, we not only understand our systems, we have the power to shift them, to change them, to make them more productive, more satisfying, more creative places to be. That's our story for the day. Thanks very much. Appreciate having the opportunity to share this with you. And I'd love to hear from you. Questions, reflections, insights. Keeps the conversation going. Thanks again. Thanks, Leanne.
So a big thank you to you, Barry, for sharing amazing insights. The things that sit with me is how pattern we fall into shape our consciousness. Such a profound, simple statement, and yet it is so instructive for all of us practitioners to be mindful with ourselves, with our clients, and with the system we live in and work with. So I'm so grateful to you for taking the time to share. If you'd like to contact Barry and continue this conversation, his email, along with his biography and links to relevant resources, are all at the end of the video. So big thank you to those of you who watch this video, and also a big thank you to you, Barry.